Hi, this is Jim Meskimen, and you're listening to the FSF Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the FSF Podcast. I'm Tim, I'm your host, and of course, Kathleen is here with us to help us welcome our guest today. Our guest is an impressionist, a stand-up comedian, and a voice artist who is just an impressive human being whose vocal talents are all over the place. You've seen him on TikTok. He's got an amazing YouTube channel. You've heard him in well more things than I guarantee you think you've heard him in. His IMDb list is a whole lot of me going, oh, wow. Holy crap, he was in that. Yeah, that was a whole lot of me going over his IMDb list. But he has also been performing as Captain Solano in Star Trek Resurgent. You've seen him in movies like Frost Nixon, Apollo 13. He is the voice of Ultron and Marvel's Avengers. He's been in, like I said, a lot of different things. I don't have time to list them all. I would be hoarse by the time we are done with this interview. Anyway, I'm already a little bit of hoarse, but that's a head cold. It is what it is. Anyway, I am very stinking excited to welcome Jim Meskimen to the FSF Podcast. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, Kathleen. Good to be here.
We're excited.
Very. We've wanted to talk to you for a while, and so having the opportunity to sit down with you is kind of an exciting thing for me because like I said, there's been so much as I was going through your list of people, or not people, a list of shows.
Mostly people.
You've been on.
Mostly portray people, but sometimes in
portray. Yeah,
robots,
you do portray some people.
Demonic robots, and yeah.
Exactly. But as I was going through that list, I was like, man, this guy's all over the place. I got to talk to him. And it was at the same time, I think that I came across your TikTok page and I was seeing your impressions and I was like, wow, he does a really good, and I think it was George W. Bush or H.W. Bush that you were doing. And I was like,
probably
it was W. It was W.
It's W. Bush, yeah, probably.
Yeah, it was W. And I started laughing. I was like, oh, that's really good. And then a couple days later, I saw another one and I don't remember who that interview was, or that one. I think it was your Robin Williams. And I was like, oh, wow. I was like, okay, cool. This guy's got some range. We got to get him on the show. And that's where it kind of began.
Nice. Well, I'm glad that TikTok lasted long enough for you to find me.
Yes, it may not last very much longer, but it lasted long enough for me to find you there. So sure. We'll see what we can do to direct you to people to your YouTube channel from here. Yeah. Now, in doing my research of you, I found out that your mother was Marion Ross, of course, the mom of Happy Days. And you grew up in, still is Marion Ross, yes. Shouldn't say was, should say still is Marion Ross.
Yeah.
But you grew up in around Hollywood. And I'm always curious when I talk to people who grew up around the Hollywood scene, somewhat, maybe not necessarily a Hollywood lifestyle, but what made you want to pursue a career inside of Hollywood when you had that type of venture point from the outside looking in type of thing? And, how did you set yourself apart from other people who were growing up in similar circumstances around you?
Oh, well, I didn't really set myself apart. But, growing up as I did in the suburbs of Los Angeles, sometimes you read about these fables or these stories where somebody is outside the walled city and they live in a little modest hut, and they bring their wares to market of a Sunday in the big city, and then they leave as soon as the guards close the gates. That's kind of how Hollywood was in a way to me. I was not a resident of Hollywood. I didn't work in Hollywood until I was, I think, in my early 30s. So I snuck in eventually, but I was a bit conflicted about the whole thing because my mother, of course, had done really well. She'd struggled very hard, worked very hard as a single mom, raising two kids, and got to be Mrs. Cunningham, which is just unbelievable bolt of lightning that she was struck by and simultaneously threw at the same time. And and she, again, was in her 40s when that happened. So up to that time, she had been living the kind of life which I currently live, which is as a working actor, doing commercials, doing guest spots on TV shows, little parts in movies, animation. She didn't really do much animation, but, basically journeyman sort of jobs to get by, being creative, making connections, refusing to get a job. So when I grew up, most of our life was in that struggling mode of my young life, and seeing my mom audition for things and not get things, and every now and then maybe she'd get a job, and it was very exciting. And then even when Happy Days started, it was a pilot, as all TV series generally are, and it did not sell right away. It languished on the shelf for quite a while. It was about a year later, by a complete weird lucky roll of the dice, that it got rejuvenated because of the success of American Graffiti and the confluence of Ron Howard's stardom in both of the projects.
Yeah.
And then it was not a hit show at first. It was in a world where there were 3 channels way back in the mists of history. It was a not tremendously well-performing series, but good enough to give a chance to. And it wasn't until like year 3, I want to say, or season 3, where it really started to become, oh man, this is really something, and it's a phenomenon, and it's a hit, and then it took off. So it was a very slow ramp up for my mother and for our family, which was good because we didn't suddenly get just showered with money and attention. We mostly maintained our regular lifestyle that just slowly, gradiently improved and got a little easier. But to answer your question, my own commitment to Hollywood and so forth, I think this was your question, didn't really start until I had sorted out whether I wanted to be a cartoonist or an actor.
Okay. Yeah. So what was the dividing point where you said, okay, I want to be an actor more than I want to be a cartoonist?
Well, I remember very vividly because I had been studying painting. I've been sort of kind of juggling both balls at once, for a long time. And I would do plays in school, and then I would work on art on my own because of my own passion. I would take art classes in university, and I would audition to get in shows. I didn't train as an actor. I wasn't a theater major, but they were all my friends. And they knew I could do, because of my voice skills, another hobby of mine, accents, characters, cartoony voices and character voices. I could always get in a play because they need a guy who can do a French accent or an English accent or something. And not everybody could do it as well as I. So I could always get in a play, and I wouldn't have to take a class, which turned out to be, I think, a kind of a lucky break, because I could have picked up some terrible habits. But instead, I picked up my own terrible habits. At least terrible habits. Anyway, but when I was in about 23 years old, I was walking down the street in Madrid, where I had been. I'd been studying art in Spain and painting, and very isolated, very hammering away at the painting life and learning how to be a classically trained painter. And I was kind of at the end of a period of study, and I ran into the actor Harvey Keitel on the streets of Madrid. And it was such an electrifying moment that it was an epiphany for me. And I realized this really excites me. And I could notice that. I was clear-headed enough at that point on that particular day to notice it. And I thought, well, maybe this is the answer. So I suddenly just pulled the trigger on the acting career. I moved to New York within a month, I think I moved to New York City and got started there.
All right. Very cool.
So looking at your IMDb, and Tim has already mentioned this as well, you have quite the extensive list of voiceovers and impressions alongside the rest of TV and movie credits that are listed. And
yeah.
I've noticed that most people seem to be able to do 1 or 2 impressions pretty well, maybe kind of well, but not many that are like fantastic. And you have a ton that are spot on fantastic. It's an incredible talent.
I love it. You have to do it. I have fun.
How do you get those impressions so spot on? Like, what's your process? Like, specifically, I was looking at the fact that you've done the voice for Nigel Thornberry after Tim Curry had done the voice for Nigel Thornberry. How would you go about finding that voice?
Well, that voice I had to audition for, and I had to really study a little bit Nigel Thornberry. And of course, I absorbed a lot of his work. But what I do, my process to answer your question is I observe, I study, and I practice a lot. I mean, that's the key to competence of anything is you observe, You study and you practice. That's what piano players do. It's what musicians do. It's what writers do. We all do the same thing. So, and how much commitment do you really have? That's the thing. And in voice, there's just not a ton of people that have that level of commitment, I think. So that's why I get set apart a little bit. But I'm very familiar with the kind of sounds that I'm capable of making at any given time in my life. And so, and I have a facility at certain accents, and my hearing is very good in terms of being able to discern vocal qualities.
If somebody's speaking like this, there's a certain kind of differentiation between where they're actually putting the sound.
Then someone like this, who's more breathy, and where it's right in the front of the face. And I can hear that, and then I can instantly now, because of all the practice I've done, I know how to duplicate that and send that out. But it's taken, obviously, my whole life to train myself to do it. And I'm not perfect. I'm always learning and always trying to get better. There's certain voices all the time. People say, are there any voices you can't do? I go, yeah, most of them I can't do. I mean, there's 8 billion people in the world, right? So there are some, as you said, that I do very well, or I do better than others. But I certainly don't do them better than the original people.
For example, Sir Patrick Stewart lately, I really enjoy speaking and communicating and conversing like Sir Patrick Stewart. And, luckily my hairline is cooperating as well. So it's all, it's all a package, you see. But I remember George W. Bush, when I first started out, I got an audition for that X-Files show. And they were looking for the series ender. I think wound up with in the Oval Office, and they had a reveal of President George W. Bush, right? And I had to audition for that voice, and I wasn't that familiar with George W. Bush at that time, even though he'd obviously been a president. But I hadn't consumed. I don't listen to the news very much, so I hadn't consumed a lot of his voice, and I had to kind of figure out a way to learn how to do it. And I actually did win that role. And at that point, when you actually get hired to do a voice, that's very validating. You think, okay, well, I thought I did a pretty good job, and now this group of people is willing to pay me money. I think that's good enough. I think that's all right.
So
your screen agrees with you.
So of the impressions that you do, the ones that you've done, what's been the hardest? Is there one that you just absolutely struggled with?
Well, many. I mean, the ones that I struggle with, I don't generally perform because it's embarrassing. It's like a weightlifter who says, "Hey, come on over to the gym. I have never lifted this much before. I think I might hurt myself. Why don't you sit down and watch me do it?" Yeah, there are ones that require more of a physical stress, I would say, in that you don't necessarily wouldn't see, but I can feel that are,
like Alan Rickman, for example. I have to sort of restructure the inside of my nose to even begin to approximate the way he spoke in order to get that peculiar sort of resonance. And then I also have to enlarge my vocabulary, which is a pain as well.
So those kind of things take a little more, I don't know, just a little more, I would say stress, not bad stress, but just you're stressing things more.
Yeah. That's still fascinating. I love it.
And, people that have a obviously very gravelly kind of voice, like Tom Waits, for example. I mean, I don't know how long I could go on in an interview in this voice. Apparently he can do it all day long. But he's been at it a little longer than I have, you see.
He has a little more practice. We'll give him a head start.
A few more Camel cigarettes, and yeah.
Now, I mentioned earlier that I follow you on TikTok, and that's kind of what got me interested. And so I'm just going to list off a couple of the voices that interested me the most, and the ones that really did catch my attention. Mm-hmm. So you've already done Sir Patrick Stewart. That is honestly, out of all your voices, him and Robin Williams are my top 2 favorites that you do.
Oh,
yeah, I just really enjoy the way that you do those. W.
And I think that has to do with the warmth of both of those characters, because Robin Williams, of course, is very welcoming, very friendly. He's the kind of guy who'd like to sit down with and have a couple of espressos just to kind of catch up.
And Sir Pat as well. You'd love to sit down and hear about Yorkshire from him, I think.
Oh, I'd love to sit down with a spot of tea with Sir Patrick. That'd be amazing.
Earl Grey.
Exactly. Hot. But yeah. So, but yeah, and then there's your Ian McKellen and all these others. But so finding you on TikTok is what led me to finding you in other places, which I come to find out you have a YouTube channel it's called Jimpressions. So what made you say, you know what? I'm doing these TikToks. This is great, but let's do something let's call it Jimpressions. Let's sit down on YouTube and because some of these you're sitting down and you're having full conversations. It's not, or there's some stand-up bits and there's everything else. So for those who haven't watched it yet, talk about your inspiration for starting the YouTube channel and why people should follow you there.
Well, I started the YouTube channel in 2009, and my inspiration was 2008. I was broke.
Fair.
And I had to make some noise. Now, in my world, when an actor needs work and is struggling a little bit, the best thing to do is to start performing anywhere, at church, kids' parties, out on the street, wherever. I used to see people in New York City performing just on the sidewalk, and there's a reason why we do that. It's a way to generate interest and income. So I didn't know much about YouTube at the time. I certainly was not I wasn't experienced at all. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But I got busy supplying content. And it really wasn't for a couple of years that I really, I kept putting stuff up. And then 2011, I had a viral video based on impressions. And all I was trying to do was get people to my live show, which is also called Jimpressions.
Mm-hmm.
And in Los Angeles, I don't know about Michigan, but in Los Angeles, it's extremely difficult to get people out to the theater. And we had a venue, actually my wife's school, the Acting Center, which is also an acting school that I go to, where we could seat 60 people. So we weren't trying to fill a stadium. It wasn't Madison Square Garden, but we were trying to get, a few dozen people in to see the show. And it was hard. And I thought, well, maybe what I ought to do is do a video of this Shakespeare and Celebrity Voices bit that I've done for years, and see what happens, because that's kind of one of the fancier pieces, flashier pieces in my show. Maybe I'll make a video of it and put it up on YouTube. So it took me a couple of days to get it perfect. I was striving to do it all in one take, of course. And anyway, finally got it done. And it went legitimately viral, and it was extremely exciting. I'd been parts of viral videos before with the Jib Jab videos that I'd done.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Worked with the Spiritualists on Jib Jab year in reviews, but I had never on my own lights, in my own back studio, created a piece of content that went viral. And when it went viral, it was just so freaking exciting. And I wasn't monetized, unfortunately, but it still felt like monetization, because what happened was I not only filled my show, but I sort of began a whole new chapter of my life as an impressionist, because at that time I wasn't on the radar as an impressionist. I was a little bit as an actor, but not as an impressionist.
No, that's great, because I think you said you weren't monetized at that time, but so you didn't get monetization. But I think what it gave you was validation.
Validation.
At some points, in order, it's nice when the money comes, but I think you also have to have some levels of validation into what you're doing in order to keep you moving forward and things like that.
Yeah, it's also very exciting to have that outlet, creative outlet, because it is free. As you've seen, I've got a variety of things on it. I have conversations with my wife, conversations with my daughter, my 34-year-old daughter, 33, I guess, who is an actress, singer, and we talk about father-daughter things and showbiz things and stuff. And that's a wonderful, it's a kind of a lovely record for us, of our conversation over the years. We also have, as you said, the impressions material. Every day I do a celebrity fortune cookie, where I open up a fortune cookie and read it in a different celebrity voice.
I have a cartoon contest that I run where I draw a cartoon because I'm still a visual artist. I draw a cartoon and invite the public to caption it, and the winner wins a prize. I have a character named Professor Nestor Jackdaws, who's an art historian from Oxmouth College in England, and he talks about different artistic things, which also kind of allows me to express another aspect of my personality that just will never go away, which is appreciation of art and painting and sculpture and things like this. And then whatever else I happen to think of. I do a lot of Colonel Sanders material because I've been the voice of Colonel Sanders for quite a long time for the KFC brand in their TV radio commercials and so forth. And so what I'll do regularly is do a kind of a phone conversation between Colonel Sanders and some other celebrity that might never have happened in real life. In fact, I can pretty much guarantee it. And then I'll put those conversations up there on the YouTubes, like you said.
On the YouTubes, nice.
Yeah, so it allows me to, it's a great area of expression. I recommend it to every actor, every voice artist, because even though, and these days I don't get a humongous amount of viewers. I have a very modest amount of subscribers, actually. It plateaued a few years ago, but I meet people and opportunities happen. And it's also a nice portfolio. If anyone ever says, hey, we're looking for a Tommy Lee Jones voice, can you do that? I'll just send them off a link. I don't even have to do it. I don't have to take the time. And that saves everybody a lot of trouble, hassle. So it's I've gotten work that way, by just sending off a little link and stuff. So I don't know. I'm a big believer in, I feel like YouTube is getting kind of creaky, but until something better comes along, I think it's pretty swell.
Yeah, I kind of feel like right now YouTube's trying to pack in too many things into the ship to try and get people here between the shorts and YouTube music now, and they're trying to bring in podcasting through that and a lot of different things. It's like they've kind of strayed away from the core of what YouTube was, and I'm worried that at some point the boards are going to break off the sides of the ship and the water's going to come in. But
yeah.
Your modest number of subscribers, which is currently at 38.2 thousand.
Yeah.
I'm like, how many?
I see people that have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Someone who was like, honestly, it always amazes me. What was it? The goo? Is that it? The slime? The slime channels where people make multicolored slime.
Hundreds of thousands of subscribers.
I go, well, who's watching this? Obviously, prisoners somewhere. I don't know. And people that pour paint onto a canvas. Like, all right. Why am I bothering to come up? Except that's what they love to do. I do what I love to do. Would it be great if 100,000 people? It really doesn't make any difference to me because I'm like this. I'm talking to a laptop. There's no actual stadium full of people or field full of people.
Yeah.
No, I understand that though, because my daughter, so for the longest time, she was addicted to those slime channels.
Okay.
And our bathroom was a science lab where she would make her own slime because she'd go watch the video, then she'd have to come in and make the slime.
Slime
how
is made
my
in
house. Yeah, how my house didn't explode.
I have banned slime in my house. I have a 5-year-old. It's not happening.
That's when Kendall got interested in it, between 5 and 8 years old.
Play-Doh is bad enough.
And then I found out that she was not only making the slime, but my little entrepreneurial daughter was taking the slime to school and selling it to kids whose parents wouldn't let them make slime.
Okay, black market slime.
That's brilliant.
I told my wife, I'm like,
that's a learning experience. That's something Gary V would say, you know what? That's a great idea. You should take that slime. Listen up. This is what you do. Absolutely. Sell the slime, double it, double down.
Love it.
So I have to ask you this before Kathleen asks her next question, because otherwise I'm going to forget about it, and I don't want to. In a totally unrelated topic, but it has to do with the impressions, and it stems from the Jimpression question. Have you ever had an opportunity to do an impression, and I'm sure you have, in front of the person whose voice that is, and have they had a reaction to it?
Yeah, not often, and I try not to, because I don't feel like that's I worry that they will take it as an evaluation, or feel a bit mocked. I think it
Okay.
kind of depends on. I've seen people do it well and effectively. There's this guy Matt Friend. Do you know Matt Friend? He's a young impressionist, really terrific. I think he does some
Yeah.
voices fantastically well, and he somehow is on the pulse of Hollywood and in the presence of major celebrities all the time, from doing red carpets and stuff. And he manages to, I think, honor them, and they look like they're having a great time when he does it. But if I just ran into somebody, as I have in the past, and Tim Curry, for example, I saw Tim Curry one time. I certainly didn't do his voice. I accidentally did Sam Elliott's voice to Sam Elliott because he surprised me, and so I can blame him. And that was not. I felt embarrassed by it. I felt embarrassed that he had drawn it out of me so quickly and so easily, even though I have a kind of an ironclad rule about it.
Suddenly I realized I was doing Sam Elliott to Sam Elliott, and what a foolish thing that must be.
I'm sure he just laughed it off, though.
He did. He laughed it off. He's a gracious man. And Ron Howard has heard my Ron Howard impression because, it was unavoidable. And he also was very gracious about it. So I don't think he minds about it.
Oh, I love it.
So lately people have been saying, in fact, last night I was in a big event and I did my Patrick Stewart in front of an audience. And afterwards some people were saying, have you ever done your Patrick Stewart for Patrick Stewart?
And I said, no. And I don't think I'd have the courage or the bad taste to do it. But, if under circumstances that were beneficial to both of us, then I might consider it.
I just, I'm aware that, I don't know, I guess I'm a little too tender around celebrities and their privacy. Maybe it's from being a New Yorker, you're like, just let them alone. Let them alone. They're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough.
That makes sense.
Fair enough.
So we have been planning this interview for nearly a year with the actors' strike, then reschedules and everything understandable. We totally understand life happens. But one of the reasons that we actually wanted to talk to you was to talk about your involvement in Star Trek Resurgence again as Captain Polano. Wow, my brain is not working.
Yeah, Captain Solano. Captain Solano had a slight Texas accent, as I recall. I enjoyed playing that character a lot because he kind of harkened back to people, actually in my family. My father's from West Texas. He didn't sound like this particularly, but I met a lot of people in that part of the world that were kind of like this, and it's a fun kind of viewpoint to take.
Yeah. So what did it mean to you to get to be part of the Star Trek universe? And are there any outtakes of you voicing Captain Picard in your lines?
Oh no!
In fact, I don't think I was doing Picard that much at that time. This is a few years ago. We did it during the pandemic, and I did it from home and worked with the producers quite a few sessions. It was a big script and a lot of fun. What it meant to me to be part of the Star Trek universe, I was very excited. First of all, because it's a big franchise. Obviously, very time-honored, groundbreaking series, the Gene Roddenberry series, and all the offshoots from it. I think it captures something very marvelous about humanity, that we love those stories. Why do we love those stories? Because we sense that there's adventure that is being that we're not taking advantage of. I mean, I would say day-to-day people are not taking much advantage of it, right? We're not up unless we're William Shatner and going up in Jeff Bezos' spaceship. We're basically earthbound people. So the idea that humanity as a group could really explore distant stars and systems is, I think, going to be always of great interest to any human being, and certainly to me. Even more so than it's interesting, the Star Wars universe is similar, except that it is millions or billions or whatever order of magnitude of years in the past, a long time ago. in a galaxy far, far away. Where the hell's that? When the hell was that? It's interesting. This one, Star Trek, is more like, no, they say 2025 or 2092, or they give you the date. It's coming up. It's we pass these landmarks, and some kind of like, this is within my reach. This is not a memory exercise. This is a future plan, and obviously has also invaded our culture and instigated and inspired invention and creation. I remember when the flip phones came along. That was like, well, I know where that came from. that was on a TV show. So it's great.
The iPad, datapad,
Yeah, so many things. I mean, now it's like you look at the old show and you're like, oh, wow, they really have an old-fashioned iPhone there, don't they? You're like, well, it wasn't old-fashioned in 1975. So I love being part of it. I'd love to do more. I liked the whole. I think it's wonderful too to play a game, and not that I'm much of a gamer, but it's great to have a game where you have to make decisions about your group and about survival and about team members and exigencies, things that come up and possibilities. I think that's a great mental exercise for people. I think to make those quick choices. And again, like voices or anything else, practice is a good thing, so that you don't have to suddenly be, in an emergency, make a sweeping, huge decision about things without any practice.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, one of the best things that a PR agent can do for us when we're getting ready for an interview like this is they'll send over a one sheet, and your agent sent us over a one sheet. So thanks, Harlan. Appreciate that. That was really very cool. Because there was one thing in there that I did not notice from my own research, and I got very excited about this because growing up, this was one of my favorite things to watch, and that was the original Thundercats animated series.
Yes, indeed.
Huge fan of Thundercats. And I come to find out that you worked on the series as an artist. You were designing characters, weapons, vehicles, things along those lines. So I'm hoping that you can indulge my fanboyness for all of 30 seconds and maybe tell me which ones you worked on. What did you design?
Well, believe it or not, in the 80s, when I moved to New York, I got a job for Jules Bass, and I was the senior character designer. I became, at age 24, the main character designer for the show. Now, when I got on board, the show had already sold. The main characters, the mutants and the Thundercats, were already designed very capably. And the Cat's Lair and probably the Thunder Tank was all designed. But nothing else was. And all the guest stars, that came in, all the new characters, the new monsters, new animals, new vehicles, up to a certain point, were all designed by yours truly. There was a point late in the series when the toy companies began to have some input, and that was I had to defer to them and their designs. But I designed a lot of stuff, and it was super fun. I really was given a lot of open rein, if you will, and got to just sort of dream up things and learn on the job. And it tickles me that people love that show and that they still remember it. And now there have been a couple of reboots of it, and I've managed to insinuate myself into both of those reboots so far. Because I tell my agents, I see the audition come up, and I go, hey, make sure they know that I was the senior character designer. And then they go, oh, and they get excited about it, and so they hire me because I'm also a voice actor. It's not like a total. It makes sense, to have me on board. It gives me a little bit of an edge over people who weren't connected to the original series. So it's fun.
That is very cool. Yeah. Even when my kids were growing up, and if I would find it on Cartoon Network or something like that, I'm like, you got to watch this, because I have two boys and a daughter. My daughter couldn't have given. My only thing that my daughter thought was cool about it was that it was a show about cats. Other than that, she had zero interest in it whatsoever.
Pretty light on the cat of it.
Yeah,
it's not very in depth. They don't ever sit around licking themselves.
No, and that's where we lost her. She's like, they're not doing cat things. I'm like, they chase a red laser in the sky. Trust me, they're doing something cat. They're doing something cat-like. Trust me. But, no, so that's very cool. I was very curious about that because that show is such a big part of my youth, and I was so very excited. We got to interview Larry Kenny a while back, the voice of Lionel, and that was just. I may have sat here for the first 10 minutes talking to him, just kind of like, trying not to drool upon myself. But.
Larry, I worked with Larry. So once eventually I went to a voice session of Thundercats because, I was an actor at that time also. And they invited me to come to one of the recordings. And it made sense because I was a character designer, so I could go. And when I watched that session, that was another epiphany for me. Because when I saw Larry Kenny and Peter Newman and Earl Hyman, Bob McFadden, and others performing, and when I saw how much fun they were having, goofing around, doing the voices, standing around in the same room, reading the script, I went, this is the job. That's the job I want. And I eventually got hired by Rankin and Bass. They did a series called The Comic Strip, which contained 4 little mini-series, each one 10 minutes long. Mm-hmm. And I got hired for 2 of those, Tiger Sharks and Mini Monsters, with the young Seth Green. And, he was like 10. And I worked in that studio. I did exactly what I had just dreamt of, and with Bob McFadden, with Larry Kenny and Peter Newman and a bunch of guys that had been on Thundercats also got into these other shows. So, yeah, it was super fun. I remember Larry Kenny, I will tell this tale on him. He would work for a guy named Don Imus in the morning. Don Imus, right? And Imus, I think, would record his show. He was on really early in the morning, like 6 a.m. or something like that. And Larry probably took the train out to Manhattan, went on the Imus show early, so he probably had to get up at 5. And then by the time he got to back to our studio at 1 in the afternoon, he was just knackered, probably had a big lunch. So when he wasn't doing lines, doing his part, he'd be over on the floor napping and sometimes snoring so loud that we had to wake him because it was getting on in the recording. Like a cat.
That's phenomenal. Yeah. Love it.
But never licking him.
We've had interviews where Tim has done the "I can hear your cat." That's really funny.
Yeah. I can hear your Larry Kenny. Yeah.
I love it. So, Jim, looking back at your career, you've had to work really hard to get where you are and to do what you're doing. Yes. You're still working on it. What advice would you give to your younger self or to younger actors or impressionists who want to try to make their own career in the arts?
Well, to myself, I definitely would have said, hey, concentrate on the impressions a lot. Make sure you make it part of your weekly deal. And to younger impressionists in general, because I would get distracted. I would do a lot of other things. I did improv. As I said, I did artwork. I did, I would kind of forget. The impressions were like, yeah, I do that, but I also do this, and I don't want to do this. And like, well, okay, that's fine. But what I really seem to make an impact with is with the impressions. So I would have probably, when I began to focus on that, as I say, in about 2009, that's when things started to actually begin to accrue. To young impressionists, I would say use YouTube, use TikTok, get in front of audiences, actually physically in front of audiences as much as possible, because there are things that you will learn from a live communication that you won't learn as easily from Instagram or TikTok or social media. You can learn from likes and comments and all that stuff, but there's something about being in front of people. And that takes a little bit of a push for most of us. We're not always comfortable being in front of an audience, and it seems like there's more to understand. But it's all good to know. And so, get in an improv group, get in community theater, figure out some way. Stand up, obviously, is a path. Figure out some way to get in front of an audience of any kind as often as you can, because you're just gonna. You're gonna get a lot of confidence. You're gonna feel like you've done something. Open mics, whatever it takes, and That's a quick piece of advice.
Very good.
Solid advice, though.
Very.
Thank you.
All right, Jim, we have one final question for you. We like to call it our silly question. It's not that intense. You'll be fine. I promise.
Okay.
We started asking this question of people because, well, Kathleen noticed that her daughter would get asked this question, but she wouldn't, and she didn't think that was fair. So, Jim Meskimen, what's your favorite dinosaur?
Well, the one that comes to mind is the pterodactyl.
Oh, yes.
And we can kind of guess that that's what they sounded like because we've seen so many movies.
Fair enough.
A pterodactyl, if you saw one today, it would strike fear into your hearts more than like a brontosaurus, right?
Something that big flying in the sky.
It's just nasty looking. It looks like it's going to mess with you.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the P in the front of its name, I would also pee in silence.
Your pee might be silent, but your screaming would not be, Tim.
No, my screaming would not be. Nice.
Jim, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. Where can our viewers and our listeners go to find out more about you and your work?
Well, thank you, first of all, Tim, for pimping my YouTube channel, Jimpressions. And you can find me every day there, at least 1 or 2 videos a day. Instagram, also at Jimpressions. And I'm putting up a lot of stuff on Instagram, as YouTube seems to be eclipsing. But also on TikTok. TikTok is eclipsing. But you can find me on TikTok. You can find me on Facebook. Also, my own website, jimmeskimen.com. You always find me there. That's not going anywhere. And if you happen to be in the LA area, come and see my live Jimpressions show. I do about once a month at the Acting Center, and you can find out about that at jimmeskimen.com or at theactingcenterla.com, which is the best acting school in the world, which, full disclosure, it's my wife's school, but it really is the best acting school in the world. Theactingcenterla.com. And also you can see me in the Big Door Prize on Apple TV Plus, which is the new series. We just dropped season 2. And I'm talking like this because I'm imitating the great Chris O'Dowd, who is the star of the show, the Big Door Prize, and I play his father. So I'm allowed to speak like this.
Very good.
That season 2 just launched a couple days ago. So, check that out.
Awesome. Well, we will definitely link your website and your socials because you've got so much cool stuff. People need to go enjoy the cool stuff and just, even if it's just to get a laugh or two, we need that.
Yeah, that's about all you'll get. You'll get a laugh or two or a smile. Yeah.
Maybe 3. There's a possibility for 3. Come on.
Whoa.
All right. We're going to go for the gusto. Maybe 3. All right, guys. Want to remind you that subscribing is the single most important thing you can do to help us continue to grow and get more amazing guests like Jim Meskimen here today to have these wonderful conversations with and moments for you guys to be able to listen to. So please subscribe and be sure to go check out the links at the bottom and go check out Jim's work as well. I guarantee you his impression work is some of the best you have ever heard. And if you go check out his IMDb page, if you're like me and you love listening to voice actors do their work, you are going to be in awe of how many things that this man has done that you did not realize he was a part of. And honestly, that could be like 12 more shows. That's a whole another series of interviews that we could do with Jim. But anyway, go check that out. Go check out Jim's work. You will not be disappointed. Again, Jim Meskimen, thank you for being on the show. And guys, thank you for tuning in to the FSF Podcast. That's all for today. Goodbye.
Copyright 2024 FSF Podcast. Reference any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF Podcast. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpodcast.com.